Hello, welcome to the Spot Robotics Podcast. Today I'm joined with my guest, Mr. Sidney Velado, discussing machine learning and software engineering. I hope you enjoy this podcast where you can gain insights into technology in the modern world and gain a new perspective and advice on how to succeed in these fields. If you enjoyed the podcast, make sure to give us a follow on wherever you get your podcast, and if you'd like to support us even more, make sure to give us a review. Thank you and enjoy. So for my first question, I want to ask what you do at Motional and like what's some of your day-to-day responsibilities and tasks are. So for my first question, I want to ask what you do at Motional and like what's some of your day-to-day responsibilities and tasks are.
Didn't you ask me this one already?
Oh, wait, could you repeat that?
Yeah, didn't we have this interview already?
Yeah, but I need to do like a recent one for another side project.
No worries. So at Motional, I'm a senior autonomy integration engineer. Day to day, I make sure that all the vehicles are working. I make sure that we're testing new and different software builds. Yeah, and just kind of make sure that our operations are pretty much streamlined. That's basically it.
My second question was, what inspired you to go into robotics and machine learning when you were young, like in high school and middle school?
I don't know. Robots were always cool. I wouldn't say I was really inspired to do that at that age. It wasn't nearly as prevalent. I think I just liked math, so I knew I wanted to do engineering, and then I started doing mechanical engineering when I was in college. And once I was there, I realized that I did not, in fact, like mechanical engineering as much as I thought. But I wanted to do more software-heavy stuff, and then robotics was really good because it's a combination of everything. So I just kind of got into that there.
My third question was, what made you choose Carnegie Mellon over other colleges, and what advice would you give to students trying to get into schools like Carnegie Mellon?
I think the best advice I can say was do. Um, well, I wanted to go to CMU mostly because it was the best school I got into. That made it really easy, and I don't know. It's just I everything I learned about it, I enjoyed. I also had learned a lot about Pittsburgh. I was a big fan of Heinz ketchup, and then I learned about Heinz starting there and all that stuff. So that was pretty interesting. But my best recommendation is to make sure you do things that are unique. You know, like you're competing against all these other kids that are doing very similar things. Like everyone has good grades, everyone has this, everyone has that. And I'm not saying you have to do anything that's super crazy, but definitely try to set yourself apart by doing more unique things. So like instead of saying like you're like, oh, like I did this class, right? You can say like I've built my own project with XYZ, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. Um, my next question was, when you look at the so I know like Motional is related to like computer vision. I want to ask, when you look at like computer vision as like a robotic engineer, where would you, I guess, expect, or where do you guys see like the next developments happening in the space?
In computer vision, it depends. There's been like a lot of debate about like classical computer vision versus machine learning based computer vision. But at the end of the day, it's all math, right? I think it's going to be kind of, I think the next step or the best step is going to be generalizing computer vision. Right now, there's like a bunch of calibration and there's a bunch of other stuff you have to do with these sensors to be able to fuse them properly. So you could have kind of like a layer that handles all that for you and just gives you the output that you desire. I see that being a potential big space.
And I had a side question. I don't know how much it affects emotional or like your day to days, but I want to ask: does generative AI impact anything you do to a day to day basis?
Not currently. I want to say generative AI is like AI as a whole, yes, but generative specifically, not really.
Okay. Uh, my next question was, I want to, if you could like give a little bit of explanation of how you got like a robotics engineering internship at Staples, and like while in college, and I want to like ask what what experience did you gain? What skills did you learn from the experience that transferred to your current job? And how did you get that job as a college student?
Well, I was already a junior, and around that time, you probably want to start looking for your
Mm-hmm.
first internship. So when you start applying for jobs, you have something to talk about and some experience to fall back on. So I was a junior, finished my year of college, and then it Carnegie Mellon is also a really good school because they have a lot of resources for stuff like that. So we have a website called Handshake, which basically companies contact the school, and they essentially like an internal recruiting tool within the university. And obviously, like they do it to get specifically students from CMU. So I got on there, I found the job listing, I applied. They called me back to talk to me, and I had my interview with them. So, it was like pretty basic. The first interview was kind of a screen, then I had a little programming assessment, and then I moved into a behavioral interview and I got the offer. Um, I think what I learned the most was it was a pretty interesting thing, right? Staples is kind of an older company. It's funny because they were pretty technologically advanced back in the day. They were one of the first ones to start off with e-commerce and like shipping actual like office supplies to offices and streamlining that process through technology. But they were kind of struggling to keep up now with Amazon, um, because Amazon basically grabbed that and kind of built a global, did it for every product ever. So right now, their biggest competitor was Amazon because, instead of doing it through Staples, you can just get stuff through Amazon. So one of those big things that we're trying to compete with is kind of like their warehouse logistics, and they wanted to use a lot more warehouse robotics to be able to do that. But when I got there, it was a little weird because the person who was originally in charge of that project had kind of left the company at that point. So I was left in a weird place where they were exploring robotics and robotic solutions that they could apply. So they asked me to produce a smart card and kind of start doing little pet projects that show kind of like robotics and certain algorithms working. So it was pretty interesting because I would say the work itself wasn't super rewarding in the sense of like it's not like I worked on a product that eventually came to market or anything, but I learned a lot about working in ambiguity and kind of, even as an intern, I had to kind of like cut out my own work and set my own milestones and stuff. And I think that was very useful once I started working. The technical stuff you can always pick up, but those kind of work skills were pretty valuable.
Gotcha. My next question was, what advice do you have for someone pursuing the career you did, and like what skills do you see that the people like for like younger kids to like learn to be successful in fields like robotics, machine learning, and all these like emerging fields?
Again, I think you just have to be ready for opportunities and looking for opportunities. And the best way to get opportunities is to be prepared. So, if, for example, you like robotics, start working on your own projects, doing your own things, because someday, somewhere, someone's going to give you an opportunity to perhaps work on them. And if you're ready for it and you can seize it and kind of start, like, I think the hardest thing is to get the ball rolling. But once you get the ball rolling, everything else becomes a lot easier. So, making sure you're prepared for that moment you get, I think, is very important.
I had another question. Was so I know we talked about jobs. I want to ask any advice for like I guess high school students to like start early to like improve their chances of getting a job in college or even after college. Like anything they could do while they're like I guess free and not having that much to worry about.
Like I said before, I think it's just, working on your own projects. Like, for example, like you can just start looking at what the new technology is coming up. So, for example, right now, a lot of the stuff we use is like C++, Python. Like you can learn Java, I guess, but it's not going to be super useful. It's not very language used in robotics a lot. But if you kept up with a lot of what's going on, again, you don't have to be super knowledgeable. You just like look through blogs or like keep up to date. You'd learn that Rust is a very big
Mm-hmm.
well, it's a very big computer language in general, but in robotics, it's kind of starting to carve its own niche. So, like, if I were in high school, I'd probably start learning Rust, since it's one of those things that not a lot of people are super familiar with yet. Um, but yeah, just work on your own projects and, stay in the loop with what's going on.
My next question was when you I guess look back at your journey as like whatever you've been through. is there any point in your life where you think you could have done anything different, or anything that was defining or like important that you feel like that really defined your career as a whole, or whatever you did?
I don't think anything. Like I'm pretty happy with the whole trajectory of how
Mm-hmm.
everything happened. But if I could do something different, I would probably just do better in school. I wouldn't say I had the best grades, and again, grades are just a reflection.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the measures that you show that you understand what you're being taught, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have the best grades, but I knew that I had to demonstrate that I still understood what was happening. So I did a lot of research, like at robotics labs within the university.
Mm-hmm.
So when people were like, "Oh, like your grades are pretty bad, like why should I hire you?" I'm like, "Oh, you know what? They're not the true measure of what I can do. Like I've worked at this lab and I've done X, Y, Z, and they asked me about that work, and I can answer the questions and kind of keep up. That meant a lot for me. So I think, but again, like if I had better grades too, like that would have been a lot easier. But that's the only thing I would have changed.
I had a question. It's for like related to like research, since I've been like interested in research and been doing some research on the side. I went to so when you were at Carnegie Mellon, you did
Yep.
some like research, if I'm correct.
Yep.
And I
Hmm.
want to basically ask like if you could talk about what your research was, what I guess made you interested in doing research in college.
Like I said, I just wanted to get my hands
Mm-hmm.
on stuff. Um, Class wasn't super interesting, but actually applying everything you learn is a lot more fun. So I would just recommend, yeah, that's pretty much the only way I got into it. And then you can just ask professors around, and they'll eventually get to you and let you know what's
Uh,
available.
could you like highlight what your research was about?
Yeah, so I worked at two different labs. One of them was, um, what's it called? One of them was in the biorobotics lab at CMU. We specifically worked on a robot. It was a biped with a actuated flywheel. So basically, this robot could walk around, run around, and then the goal was like, let's say something trips the robot, it can click that flywheel into action at a certain acceleration, so it could like straighten itself up. Um, then I worked at a different lab called the CMU SIR lab, and what their focus was, that was an underwater robot, and that robot was specifically designed to clean ship holes. There's like a lot of algae and stuff that builds up in ship holes. So it doesn't sound like a huge problem, but when you multiply that by the surface area of a boat, it can be thousands of pounds, which means lower fuel efficiency and then more costly operations. So the goal of that robot was to clean the ship holes autonomously. That way it would be a lot easier.
That's really cool. That's all the questions I really had. I just want to ask if you had any questions for me in general.
No, nothing comes to mind.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
That's it for today's podcast. Again, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow us on wherever you get your podcast. And if you'd like to support us even more, make sure to rate us wherever you get your podcast. Until then, we look forward to seeing you in a future podcast very, very soon.